So this lecture is corresponding to the PowerPoint slideshow called Rome's Rise. And so I'm on the first slide. What we're going to do here is go back in time a little bit. We finished with Hellenism around 300 BC, 200 BC. We're going to go back to about 500 BC, and we're going to go a little further into the Mediterranean to Italy. And Italy is one of those places where the Greeks had settled several colonies. If you look on the map, you'll see the yellow area in the bottom in the island of Sicily, and in the bottom of Italy are Greek colonies. And of course, there is the really famous wealthy one, which you look at Sicily, and you have Syracuse, which, as we know, is going to become one of the wealthiest city-states in the Mediterranean. So we have the Greek influence in southern Italy from their colonies, but also in this period before the year 500, the Phoenicians, remember the trading cities from the eastern Mediterranean, who had put a number of trading colonies across the southern Mediterranean. Remember, the Italians are on the top, the Greeks are along the top, and the Phoenicians are on the bottom. And one of the Phoenician city-states, colonies in North Africa, it's a city of Carthage, will expand, and in this period will become a very wealthy, powerful empire. We'll talk about it more later, controlling the Western Mediterranean. So you can see in the purple the Carthaginian Empire, which was an old Phoenician colony. The Carthaginians have been trading with Italy, and in northern Italy especially, they have been influenced by the Phoenicians. And what you have there, the orange on the map, would be the Etruscans, which are Italian kingdom, which were heavily influenced by the Phoenicians. So what you see is Greek influence from southern Italy, and then via the Carthaginians we have Phoenician influence into northern Italy, with the dominance of the Etruscan kingdom. So we're seeing this right steady little trickle of civilization floating across the Mediterranean. Now, one of the cities that are under control of the Etruscans is a city called Rome, almost in central Italy. And Rome was evolving as its own city-state, although it was dominated by the Etruscans from outside. And they, by 509 BC, had become a republic, meaning they'd eliminated their kings and set up their own city-state. Now, this was a very small city, so these are mostly farmers and noble landowners, so this might have some parallels to perhaps Thebes to some extent. We'll take a look. They have the classic citizen-soldier concept. They don't use the term hoplite, that's Greek, but it's the same thing. Your citizens are part-time soldiers defending the city-state. It's the whole idea of citizenship, which we've talked about. They set up an interesting variation of how to run their city-state. They have two consuls who are elected annually to run the city-state, so they're sort of like the executive position. So two consuls. There's two, so all the power isn't in one hand. They have a senate, which consists of the patrician class. These are the landowning nobles. So in a way, the Senate is sort of an aristocracy. Okay, it's mostly landowning nobles, and they form the Senate, which is the upper house. And there is an assembly of citizens, which consists of the plebeians, which are your regular run-of-the-mill citizens who have some money or property, and they form the assembly. That structure, consul, Senate, assembly, is fairly typical. But notice there's an interesting thing we have here. We have two tribunes added in. Now, tribunes are plebeians from the assembly who sit in the Senate and have power of veto over bills that exclusively affect the plebeians. So let's say the Senate tries to pass a tax which only taxes the plebeians and leaves the patricians, no, we're not paying taxes. The tribunes can veto that. So it protects the plebeians from the Senate, from the patricians, right, having too much power and sort of being unfair. So to set up this rather interesting republic, interesting city-state, like I said, they are technically having to pay money and are subject to the Etruscan kingdom, but it's a fairly loose control. So we have then, right, the growth of city-states of some sort with Greek and Phoenician influence in Italy, and Rome is one of those city-states. All right, so what we'll do on the next slide is we're going to very quickly jump 250 years. Very quickly. Interestingly enough, all that stuff we did in week 1 on Greece and Hellenism takes place in this 250 years, right? The Persian Wars, classical Greece, Hellenistic Greece, Alexander the Great, right? All happening over there in the Eastern Mediterranean. What's going on in Italy during this 250 years is essentially a sequence of wars in which the Romans ally with other city-states and some tribes in the mountains, and basically at first defeat the Etruscan kingdom and become independent, and then take over the Etruscan kingdom. And then once that's done, they turn south and begin taking over or bringing in as allies, depending on whether you want to or not, right? If you say, yeah, we'll be an ally, you're part of the league. If you say, no, we want to be independent, they take you over. Doesn't it sound like the Delian League and everything all over again? And in fact, it's really what it is, because Rome becomes the wealthiest and most powerful of these city-states. It leads the military alliance. I think it's more of a Sparta-type leadership than an Athenian-type leadership, but it's the same effect. Rome becomes the leader of the alliance against first the Etruscans and then the Greek colonies, and it becomes the most powerful of the city-states and dominates the alliance. So let me remind you, this is at this point still an alliance. So Italy is a bunch of allied city-states, which Rome dominates. The Etruscans used to dominate and tell everybody what to do. Now the Romans do. But we have, by getting close to the mid-3rd century BC, unified Italy under sort of Roman domination. Okay, and some of the areas. So let's move to the next slide. That was quick, wasn't it? Okay, I'm going to move to the next slide. And we're back to Carthage. So by 264, 270 BC, we have Italy unified under sort of Roman leadership. All right. Now, remember I mentioned Carthage, which had long before been a Phoenician colony and had established itself as a powerful empire of its own in the Western Mediterranean. The green on the map gives you a much fuller picture than a previous map I had. So the Carthaginians have powerful trade empire in the Western Mediterranean. They vie with Syracuse, right? That very wealthy Greek city-state in Sicily for control of Sicily, control of the central Mediterranean. But anywhere west of that, they are dominant. And they are incredibly wealthy trading city. They're in the tip of North Africa there. They have a powerful navy, of course, and they also have a powerful army which uses mercenaries, foot soldiers from what is now Spain, what then was called Iberia, and cavalry from North Africa. So they have a powerful army with top excellent cavalry and foot soldiers, and they have a superb navy, and they're a powerful, wealthy trading empire in the Western Mediterranean. But going back to Syracuse, the problem is, right, they are in conflict. If you look at Sicily on the map, they're in conflict with Syracuse over who gets to dominate Sicily. And that's what's going to lead us to what we call the Carthaginian Wars. I will go one more slide. The Carthaginian Wars, sometimes the Romans called the Punic Wars. If you look in your textbook, you may see Punic Wars. Punic is from the Latin for a Phoenician or Phoenician Wars. So they're acknowledging the Carthaginians are Phoenicians. So the Romans called it the Phoenician Wars. Okay, so Carthaginian Wars, to be clear for us. There are essentially three wars. I won't go into massive depth on them. The first war basically is where Syracuse and Carthage get into a conflict in Sicily, but this time because Rome claims to be the power protecting Italy, they ally with Syracuse and say, we're kicking the Carthaginians out of Sicily because that's part of Italy. And so what happens is what was a war between Carthage and Syracuse over Sicily becomes Rome and basically Italy versus Carthage. It becomes a huge war over who is going to control Sicily. Right, you got it? Rome backing Syracuse versus Carthage. So Rome and the Italian allies. Very long back and forth war. You can see it lasts over 20 years. Okay. Carthaginians are powerful and very, very, very good. They often defeat the Romans, and the Romans have to rebuild. They figure out how to get a navy to fight the Carthaginians effectively, and it's a very back and forth war. And what eventually happens is both sides are pretty exhausted, and the Carthaginians are out of money, and they need money because they're a trading empire. So the Carthaginians eventually say, you know what, we'll leave Sicily to you. It's not worth all this bloodshed, loss of trade, money, and everything else. We accept defeat. Sicily is yours. And so in that sense, then the Romans have won the war, and now the Roman-Italian alliance controls the very important island of Sicily. But Carthage is still strong. They still dominate the Western Mediterranean. And then there are many Carthaginians who are very upset that Carthage finally gave up at the end of the war and said, okay, keep Sicily. They felt if they'd have kept on, they would have won, because the Romans were getting pretty battered as well. You know, it was sort of a really back and forth thing. And what happens is the son of one of the generals from the First War, that general's name was Hamilcar, his son Hannibal decides to complete what he thought his father would have completed. His father was a very good general. And Hannibal is the commander of the army in Spain, the Carthaginian army in Spain, and he decides to start a second war in 218 and march from Spain. If you look at the map, he marches north through France, across the Alps and into Italy, and invades Italy from the north and triggers a new war in revenge for wanting to succeed where they hadn't allowed, he thought, his father to succeed. And it drags into a second war. Again, there's a 16-year-long war. Hannibal is extremely brilliant general. He defeats many Roman armies, but is unable to capture the fortified city of Rome or any of the cities of its allies. So you can march around, but unable to capture their cities. They are unable to defeat him. So it's sort of, again, a stalemate, not that dissimilar to the First War. So what the Romans do is they decide to we need to get Hannibal out. So they send an army to attack Spain, and hoping Hannibal will then have to leave to defend Spain. Now he decides to stay in Italy, and the Romans take Spain. So the next step is they say, okay, well, he's going to have to defend Carthage. So they move from Spain to North Africa and invade across North Africa and threaten Carthage. This forces Hannibal, of course, to finally leave Italy, come back to Carthage, and have to stop the Romans. But what the Romans have done as they're moving in North Africa, is the Roman Senate had given the general, his name's Scipio, a lot of gold, and they basically negotiated and brought the African cavalry over to the Roman side. And so Hannibal's lost all of his excellent cavalry. And because the Romans have taken Spain, he doesn't have any more Spanish mercenaries he can bring in. So he finds himself outnumbered and with the cavalry on the wrong side. So he is actually defeated in battle. Carthage is forced to surrender, and the war is over. Hannibal goes into exile. The Carthaginians are basically, they lose their entire territory, and all they're left with is their city and a few ships to defend it. Not dissimilar to Athens' defeat here after the Peloponnesian War. So the Romans, and this is a momentous turnaround, these two wars have turned Rome and its Italian allies into the dominant power of the Western Mediterranean. What had been just another bunch of city-states is now a major power that is at least as powerful, or getting close to as powerful, as some of those Hellenistic kingdoms in the East. Right, we've still got the Seleucids and Ptolemaic Empire in Egypt and the Antigonids in Greece. They're big, they're rich, they're powerful. But now we've got a rival one in the Western Mediterranean that's controlled by Rome. So they have emerged. Eventually, about 50 years later, in 149 or 146, the Romans are going to decide to finish off Carthage. Because what's annoying to them is Carthage stayed as a city, and it just continued to trade. They don't have an empire anymore, but they were allowed to continue with trade, and they're still wealthier than Rome. In fact, part of what helps them wealthy is they don't have to have a huge army because Rome's the one with the empire. So here's Carthage getting really rich while the Romans are trying to rule their empire, and it really ticks off the Romans. So they finally basically make up an excuse, attack Carthage. Carthage cannot defend itself against the Roman Empire. It's just a city. And now here's all this, power that the Romans have. And the Romans in 146 BC will destroy the city. They'll take it, capture it in very bloody fighting. The Carthaginians know they are doomed. So whereas normally you would capture a city and then it surrenders, and maybe there's some looting and stuff, this is the Carthaginians know they're dead. So the fighting is street to street, house to house, because you might as well go down fighting. The few survivors are sold into slavery and the city is completely destroyed and torn down. Carthage ceases to exist. And the Romans now completely have the Western Mediterranean. So let me see, where are we? 18 minutes. Okay, I'm going to do one more slide and then I'll do a separate lecture on the remaining slides. The Romans now have the taste of conquest, the taste of success, and these generals love conquering. You get rich, you get powerful, you get famous, right? All the wealth from the land that you've taken and the loot that you've got. Even the soldiers get loot and slaves. And there's glory as you come back with a great victory in Rome and they greet you in the streets. So they start looking east. Let's keep conquering. And the first victim, and you'll notice it's actually before the fall of Carthage, after they've defeated them in the Second War, but before they finish them off, is in a sequence of wars in the 2nd century BC. The Romans begin fighting against the Macedonians, which is essentially the old Antigonid Hellenistic kingdom. So basically it's Romans versus Greeks. As the Greeks are nervous about Roman expansion, the Romans are seeing the Greeks as the next power that might be a threat to them. And there is a sequence of wars, and by 146 BC, right at the same time that Carthage is destroyed, Greece has been conquered. And in fact, it's marked in 146 BC as Greece has conquered Corinth. Remember them? They're the last one of the city-states that hasn't been defeated. They try to keep out of wars as much as possible, or if they did, you know, with a bunch of allies. Thebes had been wrecked by Alexander the Great. Athens had been made politically and militarily powerless by the Peloponnesian War. Sparta had been defeated by Thebes, and they were powerless. Corinth sort of still trucks along. Corinth rebels, foolish. They rebel. And the Romans crush them and destroy their city, and that's the end of the fourth major independent city-state. I'm going to get back to this point shortly. They will then move on through the Seleucids over a period of about 90 years. There's a whole sequence of wars as they work their way through the Middle East. The Seleucid Empire is splitting up and there's divisions. And basically what you want to look at over a period of 140 years, 130 years, is Rome takes over most of the Hellenistic kingdoms except for Egypt. And they get power and wealth and fame from doing so. And we have an empire, which basically started with a war against Carthaginians, and then they sort of start triggering wars against other major enemies who they see as threats, and then, you know, boom, empire. Took them 200 years. Two main outcomes from this. One, there's a brief civil war between 91 and 88 called the Social War. It's a weird translation. It comes from Socii, which in Latin means allies or friends. It's the war between allies. The Romans had been getting most of the money, most of the positions of governorships, most of the wealth, because they were the ones leading it. And the other Italians are like, hey, we're doing all the fighting too. We're part of this alliance. Why do we not benefit? We want the same rights. The Romans say, no, we're in charge. We get it all. Sound familiar, right? From the Greeks. There is a brief civil war between Rome and many of its allies. But after about 3 years, they realize this is more destructive than helpful. And what happens is all of Italy become Romans. Citizenship specifically expands. If you're Italian, you're a Roman citizen, okay? A true, absolute Roman citizen. We've expanded citizenship and identity from a city to, we could call it a country or a region, if you like, to a place, right? I'm a Roman. And you might say that if you're in Syracuse or Rome or Ravenna or wherever you are, I'm a Roman and I'm a Roman citizen. That's expanding the identity beyond the city-state, which is a major change from the Greeks. Even though they might have been part of a kingdom, they still identify their citizenship within their city-state. And with the Roman conquest, that's gone, right? You lose your citizenship when you're part of the Roman Empire. There are no more hoplites. If you're in the army, you're in the Roman army. So there's no citizen soldiers. There's no Greek hoplites. There's no independent or a semi-independent city-state. It's like you're part of a Roman province with Roman governors, Roman law, Roman army, right? So the Greek city-state, the Greek polis is dead. You are part of a Roman system. And so that's a major change in the way things are going. We're going from fractured little city-states, each with their own concept of citizenship, to the beginnings of this bigger picture of Roman. We're all Roman. We're not there yet. It's only Italy, but we're moving that direction. Okay, I'll end this recording, and then what I'll do is I'll pick it back up. We'll go to a next video will be the end of the Republic and the beginning of the Empire.